That's how I jump in this.
Oh my gosh!
I don't know how long I'm gonna last in this motherfucker. You have no idea how hot it is.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is
look at this
creepy,
mask.
man.
No. Well, it's creepy, but it's also slightly slow. You know what I mean? Because this mask looks both creepy and retarded.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet some motherfuckers will watch this episode. They won't even see the difference.
All right,
like,
right.
Yeah, but wait a minute. He's not even wearing anything.
Oh my gosh.
I gotta take a little bit of time. I was going to send you the link in time, but then, you know, the problem with this mask is that fucking Chinese sellers, they promised that I could see perfectly well through this mask, but turns out I can barely see my goddamn cursor.
Right.
So I took it on and then I took it off and then I sent you the link.
Yeah.
You see, I'm gasping.
Oh my gosh.
God,
yeah.
damn.
Do you have a lot of water there?
Chance.
How are you gonna? Do you have a straw? How are you gonna drink?
No, I don't know. I haven't prepared.
So if I see you kind of fall over, I'll know that it's from lack of oxygen, right?
Yeah, you know, if I don't move, for more than 10
dehydration.
seconds,
Yeah,
I'm out. I'm honestly, I gotta salute to you for speaking on absolutely serious terms to this werewolf mask.
Right.
Because as you were given one of those stories, I'm looking at myself, and here is this retarded looking bitch, you know, and you keep seriously talking about yourself. I'm like, no way, this guy doesn't even think how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. You know, I love it. It's, you know, part of life, I think, is just having fun and being geeky and nerdy sometimes. I mean. Yeah, I was initially intended to actually spend like the whole entire hour of but I don't know if I can do it. Yeah. I don't know, we'll see. I think that would be enough for the beginning. Maybe I'll put it on later. Well, you know, but it's actually pretty cool. Maybe you'll get high from the chemicals that are in the latex in that mask, and you'll really think you're a werewolf. Yeah, I think I'm already getting higher. You know, I'm already tripping. Yeah, I told you the story about. Oh yeah, nah, fuck this shit. I'm sorry, I can't do this. Oh shit yeah, I'm fucking. I was gonna say how I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine. I love the mask. I'm putting that bitch on later, though. Yeah, absolutely. I'm putting it on later. Have I told you the story? We might have talked about. Maybe it was somebody else, but you know what holotropic breathing is? You probably know what it is. So it's one of those. You know, hallucinations indulging method that people like practice. Okay, yeah, it's like how to alter your state of consciousness. Yeah, right. Okay, and that was a story. Yeah. Who was that guy? Michael Pollan, some guy who was on Rogan a couple of years ago. So he had shared the story of how he had taken part in this nootropic breathing class. And that's exactly what happened with one guy. He started doing it. Well, it was all assisted and controlled and supposedly safe. Not for that guy, though. Yeah. You know, for that guy, it wasn't that safe. So he did it, and he legitimately imagined himself being a werewolf, and people had to stop him from jumping out of the window. Wow. You know? Yeah, it's pretty insane. That's really interesting. So I'm really thrilled to be back on your show. Thanks for having me on, and thanks to your audience for tuning in. When you mentioned, like, hey, let's do a show on werewolves, I don't know much about werewolves, so I was really, I have a curious mind, and I love to learn new things, and I love like folklore and ancient legends, ancient history, and so I've done some research, you know, to prepare for the show. Read a book. Oh yeah, I can't wait to hear it. Yeah, read a really. Oh, you read a book? Read a book, and I'm going to suggest this to you because you're into werewolves, and let me tell you, this book is fantastic. Anyone in your audience that's interested in the subjects, it's called Werewolves: The Occult Truth. It's by Konstantinos, and it covers like the legends of the werewolf. It talks about like the drug-induced or altered states of consciousness, like you just mentioned, with that breathing. It talks about real-life encounters that people claim to have had with a werewolf-type being. Is that a modern book or something of older literature? It's more of a modern book. Yeah, I think it came out probably within the past 10, 15 years. Nice. Yeah, nice. Really fantastic book. And then there's another book that I didn't get all the way through.
through, but it's called Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America by Linda S. Godfrey. And it's a thick book of just accounts of people in the United States that claim to have had encounters with these werewolves, or sometimes they call them dog men. Really interesting.
There are plenty of encounters. There's this interesting podcast called Sasquatch Chronicles. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, so mostly it focuses on these Sasquatch encounters, but time to time somebody submits this dogman encounter. And some of them creepy as shit. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can imagine seeing that goddamn face in your window at night. Fucking heart attack immediately.
I'd have a heart attack, man. I don't know. That would freak me out. I mean, I've had some paranormal experiences, but let me tell you, I haven't been face to face with a werewolf, so I don't know how I'd react.
Not yet, at least. Not until today.
I don't know if I would jab cross hook them and then
you would wish
throw a couple of round kicks, but I would probably be running the other way as fast as I could.
And you know what's really funny? None of those options would probably be successful, to be honest. You could try both of those.
No, it wouldn't. It would be very short-lived and probably wouldn't be good on my end of things. So
yeah, like if somehow miraculously you survive, it would be a nice story to tell somebody you at least had a swing on a werewolf.
That's right.
You know,
gave a right cross and a left hook, and yeah.
What if you knocked that bitch out? That would be amazing, though, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen Black Mirror, that show?
You know, I haven't, but I've heard about it, and everyone that's told me about it really thinks it's a cool show.
It's so good.
It's a series, it's so right?
Good. It's a series. It's got, I think, currently 6 seasons. They're in production for 7 seasons. And weirdly, you know, the premise of the show, it's supposed to be about this futuristic sort of technology horror future. Okay. But weirdly, there's one episode in the last season right now about a werewolf, and it's very well made. It's exactly in the classical atmosphere and style of a werewolf. Yeah, when one actress gets bit by something, and then she turns into this monster. Yeah, wow. You know, what do you think attracts people in this sort of in this type of scenarios almost? Why do people keep making films and keep writing books? What is in the nature of the image of the werewolf that people find appealing?
Well, I think, you know, I mean, it goes back in history when you talk about like legends of the werewolves and all these different cultures, and I mean, going back to I think one of the earliest accounts of, I guess you could say it could represent a werewolf, was the Epic of Gilgamesh. Have you ever heard of that? It's one of the oldest epics. It goes back like ancient Sumeria, like almost 5,000 years, and there's a story in there about King Gilgamesh. He was a king of Uruk, and he was a very kind of a tyrannical king, and he ended up with a friend who was named Enkidu. And Enkidu in the epic, it talks about he was like this wild man, and it almost sounds like he could be almost like a werewolf or a Sasquatch type being, and he lived in the woods. And a hunter came across him, and it scared the crap out of him, seeing this wild beast. And he went back and told his father about this creature that he encountered in the woods. And his father said, well, go to Uruk and tell King Gilgamesh, you know, about this, and he'll tell you what you should do. So he goes to Uruk and tells King Gilgamesh, who some people think it was a Nephilim. He was like a giant. And King Gilgamesh sends this prostitute, this temple prostitute, into the woods to basically seduce Enkidu. And his whole concept was that they would domesticate this wild beast by presenting him with this.
Well, that's that power.
Yeah, with
we all know that power.
We know it, man. It's dangerous, especially for us guys, man. We can do some stupid things, you know.
We turn into werewolves.
We turn into werewolves. The inner beast comes out, right? And so he sends this temple prostitute, and you know, they have this love-making fest that lasts for like 7 days or something,
which is also a very common topic among a lot of modern literature. To everybody's shame, I've noticed, you know, it's always these novels written by chicks about a woman and a werewolf lover or something.
Oh, really?
Chicks are also attracted by that. It's a whole
genre
of literature. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So much of it. Yeah.
It probably falls along the same lines with a lot of the vampire stuff too, right?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Although I would imagine, I don't know, I'm not experienced with that. I imagine vampire genre prevails.
Yeah.
Chicks, for some reason, like being fantasized by somebody biting their neck and sucking their blood.
Apparently.
I mean, what the fuck's with that?
I know. And so this guy Enkidu, this beast man, he was seduced, and then the gods were mad at King Gilgamesh because he was being such a tyrant, and they sent Enkidu into Uruk, the city, to teach him a lesson. And when Enkidu catches up with Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh was in bed with a woman, and it was another guy's woman. You know, he was messing around. He was a real tyrant.
And it's all in the text.
It's all in this account. And then Enkidu and Gilgamesh get into this wrestling match, and it's a tough battle, but Gilgamesh finally overcomes Enkidu, but he has so much respect for him that they become good friends, and then they go off on this series of different adventures. But Enkidu is portrayed as like a beast man or a wild man, and some people could say that he was kind of a werewolf. Now another account is in the Bible. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, he was another kind of a tyrant, and he had this dream that was really disturbing him of this giant, like a beautiful tree, and all these animals were around it, and he thought that this tree had special significance. And then in his dream he said a watcher, which they called referred to him as watchers, they were angels, some type of angelic being, came and destroyed the tree, cut the tree down, and then all the animals were scattered. And I think he saw some human figures, and they went with the animals, and then everything got bad once this tree was cut down. And so there was a prophet Daniel, and so he went to his council in Nebuchadnezzar, and he's like, can someone interpret this dream? But if you couldn't interpret the dream, you were going to be probably killed. You would be killed. So you better know what you're doing. And so I think some people lost their lives trying to interpret that dream. But the prophet Daniel interpreted his dream, and in that process of that interpretation of the dream, it was kind of foretold that unless he repented, something really bad, was gonna befall him and his kingdom. And he ended up not really repenting and continue along with his ways. And he went crazy. He was possessed with like a beast-like spirit, and he actually he left his kingdom and lived in the woods like a wild animal. And finally, I think it was after 7 years, and you'll hear that number come up again a lot in like werewolf lore and folklore, the number 7, which is interesting because you hear that number all over in the Bible, that he did come back, from being out in the wild back to his kingdom. But that's another account, early account, biblical account going back thousands of years, 2,000 years plus, of a story of potential werewolf. So you have all these stories. You have like the Egyptian, if you look at a lot of the Egyptian gods, they look like part human, part animal, right? And so it's throughout our history, and also too the Native Americans. Have you heard of the Skinwalkers?
Oh yes, that's a common
those
term,
things are creepy.
Yeah, which are not limited to just a wolf.
That's right. They can change into other animal type forms.
Which I've always found a bit boring, to be honest, because being particularly into wolves, I'm like, somebody turning into cheetah.
Yeah. You want to stick with the classical werewolves. So I think it goes back to I don't know if it's maybe a subconscious thing that goes back to our early ancestors that were living in the wild, and they had to come face to face with these wild animals, giant wolves that would hunt humans.
You think that's what could be in the core of all of this folklore?
It very well could be. I think that it very well could be. And you're talking back in ancient times where there was a lot of superstition. There was a lot of magic was practiced. And it could be a number of things. And I mean, we have accounts today where people are claiming to see these dog men, these wolf men. And I'm not saying necessarily that every single one of those accounts are true. However, there's like thousands of these accounts. So even if only a small percentage of those are legit. I mean, something's going on. So are we talking about, when we're talking about werewolves, are we talking about just someone imagining, you know, that they're seeing these things? Are they induced in an altered state of consciousness, or on drugs? Are they seeing these things? Or could these also be these beings be interdimensional? Could they be from another dimension and pop into our reality and pop out?
Yeah. I have been thinking about it. I think understanding that, I think the mind of a modern person is certainly spoiled to a certain degree by the skepticism. Okay, because if I portray myself being sort of finding myself in a situation like that, I would probably first and foremost question my state of mind immediately, whereas people of the past would probably immediately believe it for whatever they thought it was. Which I think plays a bad trick with us modern people, because, or maybe it doesn't, maybe we should be skeptical to a certain degree, but like, I've got this dark window right now, basically not far from my laptop, and sometimes I stare into that darkness, and, you know, my sick imagination, influenced deeply by all these numerous horror films that I've seen, sometimes gives me questionable pictures, and I think, okay, what would I do if something popped in a window like that, you know? So I don't know, it's like, it's always this eternal question whether it's inside or outside, you know?
That's right.
Like whether it's internal or external.
That's right. And another question is, could it be coming from internal, and could we project that externally? You know, I've heard of an experiment that was done. It was a paranormal experiment back, I think, in the 60s or 70s, where they told this group of people that this house was haunted. The house wasn't haunted. And they put them in a room. This was like an experiment. And they put them around a table, and they kind of maybe gave them a little bit of a background on the house and you know, the fact that it was haunted. And these people being together and kind of having those suggestions implanted in them, they believed that the house was haunted. And actually there was some paranormal type events that happened with that group of people.
They reported.
That they reported. Right. And so the question...
Which doesn't necessarily mean that it did happen.
No, it doesn't mean it had happened, but I think there was like... I'm not sure if they're... To the extent if they had... Recorded, yes.
Yeah,
that kind of situation. So wow, I think there was objects. Crazy. I think there was some video or audio or something of objects moving without anyone touching them. And the question is, could those suggestions that were implanted in those people, and their beliefs were so strong, could that have somehow manifested at least some paranormal...
Well, isn't it how the poltergeist explanation, isn't it how far that explanation goes? I think as diligent of an explanation as we get, is it some sort of result of human projected energies? At least that's the sort of pervading theme that's often observed in lots of horror films, paranormal horror films. It's always not that much about the house. A lot of times it's about the house, but mostly it's about who resides in that house and what demons they bring in, you know, and how it manifests.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting. I have a real story that kind of ties in a little bit with that. I know someone in my family was going through a divorce, and there was a lot of conflict in that house. And right around that particular time, my relative was reporting to me that there was paranormal activity that started up and that had never been there before. And there was a section in their dining room that got very cold, and the cats, her cats would not go in that corner. And then she reported that she started seeing this shadow, like a shadow figure moving about, like it would dart across the room, and she would turn around to see it and it would be gone. And one day in that corner of the dining room, there was a shelf on the wall with cups and little saucers and things like that. And she said the whole shelf started shaking. Shaking. Nothing else in the house was shaking. This was in California. So her and her soon-to-be ex-husband thought, is this an earthquake? You know, and so they were, you know, thinking that's what it was, but nothing else was shaking. It was that right in that corner where it got cold, where the cats
was that shelf of any particular importance, any sort of value?
Yes, absolutely, it was. And so she said, so my relative said there was one cup that fell, just one cup, and it fell off from the shelf. And she sent me a picture of it, and she didn't make the connection. She just said, explain what happened. This cup fell off. And I looked at the picture, and Bodon on the cup it said his and hers. It said his and hers.
Well, you gotta understand it immediately.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And they were getting a divorce. I mean, there was conflict, and the only thing that fell, it said his and hers.
See, I don't know if I would want to proceed with the divorce after shit like that, to be honest. I'd be like, yeah, listen, I'm ready to put up whatever it is. Let's fix it.
Let's try to work it out. But it was interesting because it reminded me of that story because, like we were saying, like it was almost like, was the conflict projected? Was that energy projected into their house, which they never had anything like that happen before, only around that particular time.
Yeah. And the problem with this paranormal activities and occurrences is that you can't proceed to them with from some kind of physical instance and perspective. You can't punch no paranormal bullshit. No. You know, like, what the hell are you gonna do to a spirit? There was one questionable comedian who said he had this bit of a joke in one of the podcasts or something. He said he wasn't really scared of ghosts and paranormal occurrences because he said, what the fuck is a ghost gonna do to me? Possess my grandma or something like that? So he wasn't much afraid of it, but you know, according to those multiple horror films, it can cause quite collateral damage. You know? Yeah,
absolutely. And there's another legend also, too, of the werewolf that you're probably familiar with that goes back to ancient Greece. And I think it's called Lycaon. He was a king. He was a king, and he became kind of a religious fanatic. And so he got to the point where he was such a religious fanatic that he was sacrificing humans, which was amongst the Greek gods, that was a no-no. And Zeus especially, you know, like the father of the gods, that was like, you don't sacrifice human beings. And so he wanted to go check out these reports himself, and you know, a lot of these gods allegedly could take the human forms, and so he showed up in King Lycaon's city as a human. And what did they do? His servants grabbed him and wanted to offer him as a sacrifice. And so they brought him to King Lycaon, and they were having a feast there, and you know, in preparation for this sacrifice. And one of Lycaon's sons told his father, he said, "This guy something's weird because he is very calm. You know, we're going to sacrifice him to the gods, and he is very calm." And so what they did is they took a plate of human flesh and with the limbs and stuff on it, and they gave it to this stranger, this calm stranger, not knowing that it was Zeus. And of course, when Zeus saw the evidence right there in front of him that what they were doing, he was obviously pissed off and revealed himself in all of his power as a god Zeus, and he cursed Lycaon and his sons to turn into wolves and to live like wild beasts. And that's what they did, and they would hunt for human flesh, and he turned them all into wolves. And that's where we get lycanthropy, that term that comes from that story, Lycaon, that ancient Greek story.
Yeah, I was going to point out to it. Yeah, which is considered, isn't it interesting? I think Wikipedia has got a page about this illness or disorder, whatever you call it, as if it's some sort of scientifically proven disability almost. How scientific is that, you think?
Oh yeah, like lycanthropy and other related things. You know, it's interesting that you mention that, because in the book that I read, he actually covers a section in there talking about like mental diseases and things like that. And I think that can account maybe for, you know, for some of the behavior, and you know, but I don't think that it accounts for all of it, because Constantinos mentions things like schizophrenia. You know, people that, you know, they hear voices, they have delusions. There's also another one. I'm looking right now for my notes here. He had a whole thing on it. Yeah, schizophrenia. also he calls body dysmorphic disorder. It's where a person's like obsessed with like something about their body. Yeah, whether it's they imagine it's inside of their body or outside.
You know, plenty of bodybuilders are befallen with this.
That is a great. That is a great example. A great example. Or like what is it that the people that I can't think of the word right.
Anorexic.
Yeah. And they can be skin and bones. They can literally be dying, and they're in their mind.
It's crazy when there's a malfunction in your brain, you will not see shit objectively.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And then there's another one that was mentioned, dissociative identity disorder. Back in the day, they used to call it MPD, or multiple personality disorder, where people would go through a traumatic experience, and then what would happen is they would, in their mind, they would almost split up into these different parts,
as a
like
defense mechanism.
Yeah.
I've just completed such a wonderful Ukrainian book about that.
Oh, really?
Holy shit, man! Yeah, a traumatic event took place in the main character's life, and he also happened to drop in the water, almost drowning, which did something to the oxygen consumption of his brain, and it all overlapped, and bam, he invented his brain as a self-defense mechanism, invented this new personality. But he was blamed in a murder. So the father of the murder, that's a little bit of digression, I apologize, we'll get back to it. But that's a really fascinating story. So the father of the murdered girl that he was blamed for, he couldn't just simply kill him, because he found that would be unfair, as if he would not, the supposedly guilty man, he would not even understand what he's being killed for. So the father invited him to his mansion as an independent detective, or for him to help to remember what he had initially done. And it's a bit of a mindfuck story. It's something like Shutter Island with DiCaprio, if you've seen that film.
No.
Have you seen that film? Oh, such a great film with Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo.
And what was the name again of that, Bodom?
Shutter Island, the film. Shutter Island.
Okay,
yeah, I don't want to give you anything about that story, but you just be ready to have your mind absolutely blown at the end of the film. Okay. Shutter Island.
Wow,
wonderful.
I'll
it's
put
based
that
on
my watch list.
Yeah,
very interesting. So I mean, could some of these accounts play into like mental disorders? Absolutely. But I don't know if all of them can be classified under that. I mean,
mental aspect is one, but also like physical sort of constituent. Some people, whether we like it or not, are horribly hairy.
Yes, there is a disorder that it causes excessive hair growth, and there was a family out of Mexico. They called them like the werewolf family, and I met one of them before. This was about probably 25 years ago at a circus. And if you looked at his face, I mean, it was completely covered. Completely, like in the old, it reminded me like the old school, like the werewolf movies, how they would look with just, that's how he looked, and I mean, just imagine, it back, hundreds of years ago, if you didn't know what that was and you encountered someone that looked like that, I could imagine, you might think.
Especially if that person happened to be particularly lucky to possess some sort of disorder, mental disorder.
Yeah, combine that with that, absolutely.
Combined with some physical strength of immense level. Bam, there we go. Fucking ready, recipes cooked.
No doubt. I think definitely mental issues can play about it. And then also too, I mean, there was a lot of superstition, there was a lot of belief in magic, and so when I was researching the book I was reading, it was talking about different types of werewolves. There was categories. There was involuntary werewolves, those people that didn't want to become werewolves, that ended up becoming
werewolves. What about
werewolves.
the opposite? Those who wanted
and then there's voluntary werewolves, and there's actually documented cases, and I've taken some notes, and I could share some of those cases where these people came forward to the courts and said, I'm a werewolf. I killed these people. So you have involuntary, you have voluntary, then you have again, we go back to the question, interdimensional. Could they be could some of these things be interdimensional beings? Could they also be astral projections. There are some people like the shamans that could claim they could astrally project their consciousness, but they could project it in the form of an animal, right? Maybe a wolf.
Right. Yeah. I've been fascinated by this topic of astral projection, especially according to those things, those myths and stories, like Robert Monroe. Have you ever heard about this author, perhaps?
The name sounds familiar.
Robert Monroe was one of the first. He doesn't have a good ring to his name, because what he wrote about in his book is just it's a outright crazy. So basically he said about astral projecting out of his body and paying a visit to his females that he used to know and basically pinching them. Or maybe that wasn't the only thing that he would do. And then later, when he would return to his normal shape, according to him, those females would corroborate having some sort of marks on their bodies.
Interaction. Yeah. That's really interesting. And that gets also into remote viewing. That our military, the United States military back in the 70s, actually trained a group of remote viewers to project their consciousness in other points and places throughout the world.
That's a straight up Stranger Things plot, if you've seen that show.
It's legit. I mean, our government here in the United States, and probably other governments as well, have experimented with this type of stuff. And also another thing to consider is also like religious hysteria. You know, of persons like really religious, really superstitious, they have these beliefs, these very powerful beliefs, and you know, how much does that play into the werewolf legends? You know, again, it's a projection. You know, is what they're seeing, is it coming from up here? They're thinking these things these strong beliefs. Very very interesting. And also too, there was, you know, like belief in if you made a pact with the devil. You know, if you were in league with the devil, that you could be turned into a werewolf, or if you crossed a witch, so that you could have a curse put on you that could turn you into a werewolf. In fact, when I was doing research into the historical accounts of werewolves and the legends, I didn't really find much in the way of you get bit by one of these things, you turn into one. Hardly anything about that. It was mostly you could be cursed by a witch, a warlock, a wizard, even beliefs that if you ate the meat of a dead animal that was killed by a wolf, you could become a werewolf.
Wow.
Yeah, or for example, drinking water out of the paw print of a wolf could turn you into a werewolf. And some of the more unusual things, Bodon, was being born on Christmas. Over in Europe, in some cultures, if you were born on Christmas, you could very well become a werewolf.
Okay.
Very unusual.
I was afraid it was going to go into a little bit weird direction. Thinking wolf's pee or something.
Right. You know? So there are some strange. I mean, there are some strange beliefs, and then even in like the Norse culture, have you heard of the berserkers?
Yeah.
They would put on the animal pelts, and I think they took some type of hallucinogenics or drugs. And these warriors, they thought they were wolves, and they would go into battle in an incredible frenzy, and it would give them strength, and they would kill everything around them, including if any of their fellow friends got in their way, they would annihilate everything. So also too, there's that. How much does altered states of consciousness, drugs, how much does that play into this this whole belief about werewolves?
Not least important, that's been forgotten, is the impact of the full moon. Which, speaking of, I think these days exactly, I've seen that post on Instagram that it's exactly around these days that we can observe the biggest full moon in this year.
I thought about this show last night when I was driving. I took my son to basketball practice, and I'm on the highway, and it's getting pitch black, like really early. And Bodon, the moon was huge. It was huge, and the clouds were just slowly parting from it, and it was like right out of a scene, out of a horror movie. I was waiting for like wolves to start howling, and I was thinking about this show. I'm like, oh man, we're doing the werewolf show tomorrow. But absolutely, and you know, the concept of the full moon is also really connected with the belief in magic. and the different rituals associated with that. So you tie that in with the beliefs of magic, and then you have wolves, wild wolves out in the woods, and they have been known to howl at the moon, and if you're out and you're lost in the woods and you're a little peasant and you're traveling and you hear these howling, there's a full moon and you hear the wolves howling, and know you're in trouble. How easy is that to associate with?
Well, for all you know, being a peasant is already shit. If you're a little peasant,
you
better be a big peasant.
You better be a big peasant, right? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so, it's interesting. And in a lot of beliefs, like in Armenia, I think there was a belief, their version of the werewolves, a lot of women were turned into werewolves. And it was because their sin. It was because they were doing some bad stuff. And they were turned...
like always do.
Yeah, always blame the women, right? Go back to the Garden of Eden. Eve messed every damn thing up for us, right? But, these women that were committed sins... They could be turned into werewolves, and in some cultures, what I found interesting during my research is that in some cases you could actually come out of being a werewolf. You can be cured of it. Some of these were like not killing a human for a certain period of time. You can be changed back into a human. Or some people were cursed for a specific amount of time, and the number 7 came up quite a bit, like a 7-year period of time. Even mentioned Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible, right? It was predicted that for 7 years he'd be living as a wild beast. So, really interesting beliefs. But another fascinating one is that if you were born the 7th son out of wedlock, you were likely to be a werewolf.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And what was happening, and this wasn't just a belief in one country. There's other countries that believed in this. In fact, I think it was in Argentina back in the 1920s. There were so many children that were the 7th son that families would desert them to die because they thought they would turn into a werewolf, that the president of Argentina at that time made a law that every 7th son, he would be the godfather for them. And he would even give them a scholarship, and he would baptize them to keep people from taking their 7th son and leaving them out someplace to die. And that just goes to show you the power.
That was a nice incentive.
A nice incentive. The power of belief, right? That even into, we're not talking about Middle Ages. We're talking about in the late 1920s that this was enacted.
Have you ever seen any film in which the infected character, the werewolf one, cures himself, gets cured?
Since this show, I've watched a lot of werewolf movies.
Really?
And I have I have to tell you, not in any one of them portrayed in the movies was there a cure for.
Yeah. What the fuck happened I've recently rewatched Van Helsing. Have you seen that one with Hugh Jackman?
I have never seen Van Helsing. I've seen little clips of it.
He was turned into a werewolf, but he was but the sort of spell, the jinx, was put on him by Count Dracula, and once he defeats Count Dracula, he becomes normal, which was a little bit of a cheap move in my opinion. I'm like, well, once you're there, there's no way back.
Right.
Yeah, but that was a nice one. So what have you seen? What films have you seen in the run-up?
Oh, boy. Yeah. So I saw my favorites. The Howling, the first one. Howling 1, Howling 2. And let me talk about the Howling series, because they made a bunch of other ones, and I think they were garbage. Have you seen the Howling?
The newest ones?
Yeah. Have you seen that Howling 1 or Howling?
I think all of them.
All of them. Yeah. I really like the concept of these werewolves that live amongst us, and they have like this secret society. Like they realize in order to survive, they have to kind of blend in with us.
Right.
And I like that that whole concept. And
a little bit of urbanization of the topic.
Exactly. Yeah, I really love those two movies, and I had to watch Dog Soldiers. I had to.
Oh, you watched that for the first time?
Oh my gosh, right? That is an intense freaking movie. Like from the very beginning, it takes off, and some of the parts I distinctly remember is a guy's intestines are hanging out, and the dog is playing tug of war with his intestines.
Yeah.
I'm like,
you see, I've lost that. I don't forget it.
Oh my gosh,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
there's actually weirdly there's a second part, I believe.
Really?
Or maybe they're making it. Or no, I think I'm mistaking it with the second part of that French film. That story of Gévaudan Beast, or whatever you pronounce that town.
That's an interesting story.
Yeah, so the first film is outstanding. It's one of my all-time favorites, to be honest. I think it's, in translation to English, it's something like Brotherhood of the Wolf, or something like that.
I do remember seeing a show back in the 90s, Brotherhood of the Wolf. I don't remember very much.
The show?
Yeah, it was a move. There was a movie called Brotherhood of the Wolf, and it actually combined some martial arts type stuff in the fight scenes, and it was
there was this Damascus, the mascot, some kind of guy who was like at the same level with who was this guy that did Split on 2 trucks? Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, it was Dacascos, his son. It was his son. Yeah, actually,
was it his son?
It was his son. I think Mark Dacascos, or maybe it was him or his son. But
that's the film. Yeah, that's the film. So he was there. Yeah, he played this mysterious sort of hunter almost, and people were inclined to believe that he was the main sort of danger in the film, whereas he was the main counter sort of element to the danger. Yeah, that's an amazing film. I really love it.
Yeah, so I watched Howling 1, Howling 2, and of course I had to rewatch American Werewolf in London. That's one of my all-time favorites.
That's a great one.
Gosh, I love that. And just the not only like the very beginning, just the intensity of that werewolf attack and going off the road and
is that the one that begins with 2 guys sort of rambling in hiking in a field somewhere, coming to some sort of local tavern, right? Yeah, that atmosphere is great. But there's another one with Jack Nicholson. What's that called?
Oh, yeah, I saw that when it came out. That came out in the 90s, and that's one that I wanted to rewatch, and I haven't.
But it's also something like American or English werewolf in somewhere, wasn't it? Oh no, it might have been just like Wolfman or something.
It's like some Wolfman, something, simple title. That's one I want to rewatch. So I watch American Werewolf in London. I watch Dog Soldiers, Howling 1, Howling 2 is a hoot. I love that it has Christopher Lee. I loved that guy.
Wow, really?
Yeah, as the werewolf hunter. He was a werewolf hunter, and he passed away here maybe 10 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, the one from Lord of the Rings, most famously.
Yeah, I loved him.
They blamed him. There were a couple of articles I read the other day blamed him for being involved in some sort of occultism practices, which he, of course, denied. Have you ever heard about Aleister Crowley?
Absolutely, I've heard of Aleister Crowley. Interesting enough, a guy over here who's long passed away, who started some people would say a cult of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. He was connected with another guy that was affiliated with Aleister Crowley.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I've read recently his book, The Moon Baby in Translation, or something like that.
Was that? Did that have to do? Because there was a ritual that was done with L. Ron Hubbard, and there was another gentleman, I can't think of his name, but they were both followers of Crowley, and they did this ritual out in the desert called the Babylon Awakening, where they wanted to bring this entity into this world, right? And if you're trying to bring an entity named Babylon, like that's not some good shit. That's something you shouldn't be messing with that, right? That should tell you right away.
It's a very commonly parading element of his works, always doing something very sacrificial, and not sacrificial in terms of like perhaps gory or bloody. Yeah. But that was this amazing film called A Dark Song. Yeah, I believe it's called A Dark Song. Amazing horror film.
Wow.
Considered like modern horror film. It's called A Dark Song. It's very based on Aleister Crowley's premises. So you would have to lock yourself in a house for like 3 months, never leaving. Circle the house with salt, with circle made of salt. Yeah. You would have to sit in a small circle for like 24 hours. Yeah, you would. It requires. But at the end of that film, it actually happened. She did summon an angel. Actually, it was an angel. It's a bit of a spoiler for you. Yeah. And I will probably never forget how that angel that she finally summoned, how it looked like. It's a scary film, but it's a deep one, because the angel looked, it looked like some of those videos that we watched in the previous episodes.
Yeah. That you were showing.
That angel was, yeah, that angel. When I saw that angel, I almost wanted to cry, to be honest.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is interesting. You're bringing this up about ritual, because when I was studying the werewolf lore, there are allegedly rituals that can turn you into a werewolf. And this goes back to the voluntary aspect of people who wanted to become a werewolf. And some of those rituals would involve going out into the woods and making a circle around you with sand or dirt, and you would have like an iron kettle, and you would put certain things in there like opium and poppy seed and hemlock and these other herbs, and you would burn these things up. You would boil them so the vapors would come up, and again, we get into possibly drug-induced states of consciousness. And
question is if it lasts.
If it lasts, right? Exactly. And so also too, there were objects sometimes involved in these rituals, and the two that kept coming up was like some type of an ointment that was rubbed on the body. It was rubbed on the body, and a girdle, they called it a wolf girdle, and it was a girdle that was made out of wolf skin. And so someone may be going through this ritual, they would put on the girdle, the wolf girdle, and they would take their shirt off, and they would cover themselves with this ointment. Who knows what was in there? And they're inhaling the vapors of all these things like opium and hemlock and saffron and these things. And in a ritual format, out in the woods, you're out there, and then they would chant, and there were specific chants that they would say to transform them into a werewolf. And it all goes back to like what you're talking about, these rituals, these ritualistic practices. How does that affect the consciousness? How does that affect the subconscious, right? Because magic, you're trying to use the power of your mind, of magic, to influence the physical world around you.
When you watch a film or read a book where the werewolf is a protagonist, it's fairly understandable. But which is very common, when the main character is the werewolf and you feel compassionate and you feel for the person, that sometimes makes me personally wonder how I would put up with a trouble of that sort. And like, you've probably found yourself thinking about that, what the fuck you would do if you found yourself in a situation like that. What would be, I know it's a bit of a stupid conversation, but how would you go about that once you understand you are that?
It always,
what would you do?
It goes back to like a lot of these movies. It's like, okay, I've got to kill myself. Because I'm a danger. But it seems like when you watch the movies, just like in American Werewolf in London and other movies, he was trying to kill himself. He took the knife to his wrist, and he was just going to do it, and he just couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And there was another movie that I saw called Bad Moon. It came out in the 90s. I watched it for the first time. It's actually you would probably like it. It was with Michael Pere as the lead actor. And he, it starts off, I won't give away too many spoilers, but just kind of give you a general idea. He was kind of in I think it was like a wildlife photographer, and he was in South America with his fiance and some other people that were traveling with them, and they were making love in this tent, and it was getting pretty steamy. And of all times to be attacked by a werewolf, they were attacked when they were getting.
That's the moment.
That's when they were getting down to business. But this,
I'd be so pissed. I'd be just swinging at that bitch.
This werewolf comes, and the way they make it look too in the movie, I think they did a pretty good job. And it just tears his fiance, just rips the tent, just pulls her out, and he's just in this moment, he's just looking at his beautiful fiance being ripped apart by this giant wolf, and he's got a shotgun, and he grabs it, and he just boom, you know, he blows its head off, and then basically he was torn up, he was all scratched up, and this guy became a werewolf, and so he travels back to the United States, and he goes out in the woods and lives out in a camper, and he travels from place to place, but he's turning into a werewolf, and he's killing hikers and stuff, and finally he ends up in the Pacific Northwest where I live, and his sister lives out there with her son, and so as he's traveling in his trailer, he's got all these chemicals and everything, and he's doing this research to see if he can change back into a human. And nothing's working. And so he thought by going back to stay with his sister for a little while, maybe it was the love of family that would somehow transform him.
It's probably a bad idea.
It was a bad idea. I'm not going to say anymore, but it was a bad idea.
No, I think I got where it's going. Probably getting yourself as secluded, as hermit as possible. So that's what I would do. You would need somebody to lock yourself up. You know, that's what they always do.
It reminds me of a story. There's actually an account, one of the accounts that I researched about, and I think this was in Germany, and this boy was conceived on Christmas, which was bad news, and the villagers were like, oh man, he's going to be a werewolf. And sure enough, this little boy, he would sometimes turn into a little wolf. It was like a little wolf cub, and the villagers knew obviously this is a bad thing, but they couldn't bring themselves to kill this little wolf, you know, and knowing that it's this little boy. And so what they did is they locked it up. You know, as it grew up, they would lock the boy up in the time of the full moon, and gradually as he got older, he became a man, and he actually married a woman in the village, and everyone in this village knew that he would transform. So what he would do is he would lock himself in a room in his house, or not lock himself, but he would actually, his wife would lock herself in the room, and he would run, you know, he would go away from the village and go out in the woods and do what werewolves do. And one day, I think this was on Christmas, she had locked herself in, he was out doing the werewolf thing, and apparently she didn't shut the door all the way, or the thing was he would knock 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and that would be the sign to open the door that he had transformed back, right? So anyway, either she didn't shut the door all the way, or
it became smart.
But so she was ripped to shreds by her husband on Christmas. Jeez. And when the other villagers came to the house, they found him transformed into a human, and his wife ripped to shreds. And actually, before they came to the house, he had already committed suicide. You know, after, you know, feeling so bad that he killed his wife. And this was what a Christmas story, huh? This is all on Christmas.
Oh my, yeah. That's not the kind of story that they would tell on TV on Christmas.
No.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's you would think that. You want to believe that you would be able to control and manage yourself, and you would resist, you know, and you would stop yourself in the right moment. How could you kill the most beloved one?
Yeah.
Right. But then you're not you if you just even imagine that.
You know, and another interesting aspect that you just reminded me of too is, have you ever heard like the expression "the beast within"? Like it's
not only an expression. I was just going to bring the newly released film with Kit Harington. It's called exactly like that.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, it's like inside of us, you know, we have the potential, you know, to totally lose control and do something horrible that we normally would not do. It's so funny, as I'm talking to you right now, I have my shades open, and a big orange cat just jumped up on the recycling bin and was just looking at me through the window, right?
Well, you managed that pretty well.
No
jump scares.
At least it wasn't a black cat or a werewolf, for example. But you know, this concept that we have this inner beast within us, and that could come out. Excuse me.
Which could be tapped into time to time, right? Damn, hope you're not transforming, huh? That would be a plot twist. Well, guess what? I've already transformed, and I go back. Look at this dumbass right there.
I think I'm running my mouth too much.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're going to have to take over for a little bit.
Okay, all right. Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I think I got what you mean. I got what you're talking. It's an interesting topic. When I think that could have served as a like starting ground for all of this folklores inspired stories. People that lost themselves for a second or perhaps longer, and they and it became, because it's always been present in us.
Yes,
it's always been our part. So I honestly don't know where the fuck to put this fucking mask after the podcast is over. You know, that's what I've been thinking about. Meanwhile,
you should I don't know. You should put it. You should maybe find something to.
I should put it on.
Well,
that's what you want to say.
You should find something to put it on, like and put it near your window, so the werewolf is looking out. So if someone's walking by your house, especially at night, they could see that.
Bro, now you know what? It's a legit way to get my neighbors traumatized permanently.
Absolutely, yes.
Imagine what a horrible joke it would be. Well, if I stretch it like that, it looks even more retarded. Yeah, but imagine what a horrible joke it would be to kind of silently crawl upon my neighbor's window and just look at that window. If you see a shit like that with this glowing...
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why those goddamn eyes are glowing yellow eyes. It's going to be a permanent shock.
It's going to be a permanent shock, yeah. I don't know if people in your area have guns in their house.
Oh, man, this is Ukraine, baby. Of course we fucking have
guns. They have guns.
You never know what shows up next to the window.
Be careful. If you do that, be careful. Yeah.
So it's interesting how you say that in one of those films the werewolf got shot and his head exploded with a simple bullet, right?
It was a simple bullet. It wasn't a silver bullet. And you know, when I was doing research into the kind of the werewolf lore, there is some stories that do trace back silver as being what can kill a werewolf. And you mentioned earlier about the wolf attacks. It was at Gévaudan in France.
Yeah, the Beast of Gévaudan.
Gévaudan. Allegedly, the hunter that killed the wolf supposedly actually had a silver chalice melted down, and it was blessed by a priest. And he said that was the bullet that killed that beast of Gévaudan.
You would enjoy that film so much.
I want to see it,
It's got to be absolutely the very next film that you're going to watch after this podcast is over.
Yeah, most definitely.
It's unprecedented. It's so good.
The story is just fascinating about that. I mean, there was a lot...
And we still don't know what the fuck it was.
They don't know what the fuck it was. And in fact, it killed... If my understanding is correct, it primarily killed... women and children is what targeted,
sure.
and some people believed, because didn't they say that it had kind of almost like a rust color to it?
That's explained in the film.
Okay, and don't some people believe that it was a lion? That it could have been a lion that escaped from one of these traveling shows, and that it was.
I don't know if that would explain killing mainly females and children, though. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that would explain, even if it was a lion.
Right.
Yeah, that film explains everything quite eloquently in terms of from the perspective of conspiracy theory that eventually proven to be true. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna enjoy that. Yeah, that goddamn film was probably one of the first films that truly traumatized my little ass when I watched it for the first time. I must have been like fucking 10 years old or something.
Oh my gosh.
And it opens with this interesting scene. You're gonna see it. There's this woman. I think she's like a shepherd. She takes care of sheep, and then they didn't see. They did. I always fuck this shit. I'm breathing out. God damn, I can't last in this bitch.
Yeah,
So, and those films are always cool, in which the main monster or whatever it is not fully shown. But what they clearly showed is when this woman, this young girl, her body was just flinging left and right because something was just basically playing with it as if it's nothing.
Yeah.
From one part of this hill to another, just in covered in blood, and her face covered. And there will be another scene when two kids are lost in the forest, and I could also very much sympathize with those kids and relate to them, because I was probably a parent around their age. And I imagine myself being stuck in a goddamn forest surrounded by some shit that's of no human nature, clearly.
Yeah, it'd be terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Well, to kind of go back to an earlier question, you brought up an interesting question about is there, like in the movies, is there a cure, or in the folklore, is there a cure if you are turned into a werewolf? And some of the research that I did said yes, there were some cures. One of them being an exorcism. In some cases,
I got an exorcist friend.
Oh, really?
A real one.
Interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And he's blind.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I had a podcast with him. I'm going to send you the link.
Oh, that would be so cool. I'm very fascinated with that whole topic.
He's got all kinds of stories.
Wow, I bet. So in some cases, exorcism. In some cases, like I think I mentioned earlier, if you were turned into a werewolf, if for a period of time you didn't eat human flesh, you could be transformed back into a human. So
I wonder how difficult it is to practically perceive, to restrain yourself. You know?
Yeah, probably.
I wonder if that could be compared to us being hungry and staying away from chicken or something.
That's right.
You know.
Absolutely.
Impossible.
Yeah, you know. Chicken, hamburger, pizza, right? I wouldn't last long.
Yeah, I'd be a werewolf all the way.
I'd be werewolf. I'd be like, out of hell with it. I'm eating this pizza, Yeah, I'll transform.
I'd be the pizzarella. That's what I would be.
But so there were some cures. Also, too, again, I found a lot of information on the connection with ritual, and another kind of a creepy element to this story. Remember, I was describing like an example of a ritual with making a circle and having the wolf girdle and the ointment and chanting. Well, in some of these cases of people who actually wanted to become a werewolf or ended up becoming werewolves, they described of meeting these a dark figure or dark horseman in the woods who gave them like this ointment or this wolf girdle and said, if you rub this on your body or if you put this wolf girdle on, you can be transformed into a wolf. There was a story, I think this comes out of Germany. This man who was just married, he was out in the woods and he was hunting for food for him and his wife, and he wasn't having much luck. And they, back then, if you couldn't catch your own food, if you didn't know how to provide for yourself, you couldn't just go down to the grocery store like now and get your food. If you'd die, you'd starve. So he wasn't having luck, getting food. And so when he was out in the woods, he encountered these dark horsemen, which I thought sounded real creepy. And this guy admitted, they said, if you renounce the church and you stay away from the church, we will help you to get your food. And he had actually had some sheep and they were lost in a storm, and they said, we'll help you get your sheep back. And so he, out of desperation, he said, I'll do it. We need to eat. And so at any rate, so then this man, he stayed away from the church, just like he was told to do as part of this pact, this deal, like making a deal with the devil, right? And you renege on the deal you made with the devil, and you're in big trouble. I've actually met two people in my life that have told me, Floyd, I've made a deal with the devil. They were in very desperate situations, so it's not an uncommon thing.
Figuratively or like directly?
Well, they said figuratively, but I kind of get like, man, this is, I mean, it's like, you pray to God, you're praying to God, but they were praying, they felt like their prayers weren't being answered, and they were so desperate that they were praying the other direction, and
probably acting accordingly.
Which is not good. So, at any rate,
there's this story called "The Devil and Tom Walker." Have you heard of that? Story?
That name sounds familiar. I'm not familiar with it, but that name.
It's a story. It's an old story written in this sort of a horror style, and I think it's very relevant. At least according to the preface of the book that I found it in, it says that it's commonly heard and retold in the United States particularly. Yeah, it's on the topic of making a bargain with the devil, making a deal with the
making
one.
a deal with the devil. And so this guy, he stayed away from the church, but then finally he's like, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. And he goes back to the church, and this mysterious figure appears to him and says, hey, you better remember your deal. And gave him this ointment to put on, and him and this other guy put this ointment on, and they turn into these werewolves, and they go and they kill a bunch of people in the village, and finally they are caught. And usually when the alleged werewolf is caught, they're not like in werewolf form, right? They're in human form, and it's kind of after the fact. And they both admitted. They said, "Yeah, we killed these women, we killed these children," and they were executed.
Have you asked yourself what you would do in his place?
Oh boy, if I was being offered a deal.
But also being offered a deal in that dire state of having no food and having your family potentially dying.
Well, it's easy for us to say because we're not in that situation. I would like to think that it's like, I wouldn't do it, I don't care, I would starve or whatever. But you know what, Bodan? I mean, if a person is desperate, and your family, if you're trying to provide for it's just like this. If there was some disaster, like apocalyptic type situation, there'd be a lot of good people out there probably doing very bad things, not things they would normally do, but just to survive. If they had a family to feed.
To survive is one, but also an emergency of some levels like that always often strip some moral restraints from a lot of people.
Wasn't there like a plane crash in South America? Was it back in the 70s or something? And up in the mountains, and these people ended up becoming cannibals because they wanted to survive.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you got to do what you got to. Isn't it interesting how? Again, emergencies of that sort, it removes everything that society has given us, for the better or worse, probably for the worse, but it's interesting how in moments like that you understand how much illusions and fictitious layers surround you,
And again, it goes back to that primal beast within, right?
Yeah, of unleashing the beast.
Unleashing the beast that comes out, survive.
Which can save you sometimes. Maybe it's there for a reason.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. There's a part of our brain, it's more in the back, it's like the limbic system. And actually I've heard it called have you heard it? Like the reptile
brain.
Yeah, it's survival. It acts strictly on survival. It doesn't really experience a lot of emotions or anything. It's just strictly survive.
Returning to the moon topic for short second, it's interesting how, according to a lot of explanation, people try to approach this moon effect on people magically and ritualistically, and from terms of folklore. What about trying to approach it a bit more scientifically? I've heard the other day this theory that apparently people tend to treat the full moon, as a bit of a magic fake bullshit. But clearly the moon affects the tidal waves.
Yeah, absolutely.
The moon controls the hugest bodies of water on Earth. And then you combine it with the fact that the human body is predominantly made of water. It can't but have some sort of impact.
It's got to have some kind of impact. And a lot of the law enforcement agencies will tell you on the nights of the full moon, usually there's a lot more crimes that are committed.
Crimes are through the roof, for sure. Yeah. So what do you think it is?
I don't exactly know, but I think you're onto something, Bodan. I think it's not just a bunch of BS. I think that the moon does definitely affect us. The full moon does have an effect. Don't exactly know what it is, but if it can affect the tides on the planet, it could definitely have an effect on us. And also, too, with that, you also have the power of belief as well. And if a person, depending upon what their beliefs are powerful. They're so powerful that, have you heard of the cases of stigmata, where people will, the very religious people, they will have blood coming out of their, their hands as if they've been crucified. and depend.
Yeah, bruises.
And bruises and marks on the body, and it depends. I mean, like some of them that believe that Christ was crucified through the nails through the hands. We talked about this when we did the show on the Shroud of Turin. And if they believe that the nails went through the hands, well then guess where the blood's going to come from? In stigmata, they're going to come from the hands. But if they believe that it was through the wrist, guess where the blood's going to come from? It's not going to come from the hands, it's going to come from the wrist.
It's wonderful how powerful the mind really is and what it can do to the body. How you or some other controlling instance in your brain. Because I think it's at that point, it's not really the conscious you that makes your wrist bleed, basically, right?
No, I believe it's subconscious. It goes. I think I described it before in our last episode of like the iceberg, right? The little part above the water, that's the conscious mind. That's our analytical mind. But you go below the surface, and it's like a mountain underneath there, and that represents our subconscious mind, or some people call unconscious mind, and that has to do with quite a number of things. That has to do with all the programming that we've picked up since we've been alive, the influences of our family, our religion, our society, our traumas that we've had. Those are all lodged in the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is also linked with the autonomic nervous system. It's a system in our body where, like for example, when we blink our eyes, we don't have to consciously think, oh, now I need to blink my eyes. Our body just does it, right? We don't even think, or like when to take a breath, or when, we have all these things going on in our body right now as we speak that we don't have to consciously think to do. They're just, our body is just automatically, functioning as it should. So our subconscious mind has a huge influence on our body. They're interconnected. It has to do with also our healing. And I've experienced this firsthand, and I've worked with people in certain ways of how to use your mind to help with healing in the body, to help mentally prepare people that are going in for, say, surgery and that type of thing, how to put themselves in an altered state of consciousness where they will be in a good place to receive that medical treatment. In fact, I just had knee surgery about 5 months ago. And they wheeled me in, and I gave them my personal belongings, my wallet, and I gave them my cell phone, and they have a little locker. They were going to put me in the little temporary room before surgery, and the nurse is like, "Are you sure you want to put your phone in there? Because it's going to be like 2 hours or 3 hours." And I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I could be 2 or 3 hours without my phone." It's like she's probably so used to people like they have to have their phone. They have to have their phone.
It would have been nice to have a phone for 2 hours, but it's also nice how you tested yourself.
Well, I tested, and I'll tell you what I did during that time. I didn't sit and twiddle my thumbs. There was something specific that I did. So I left my phone. I left everything. And I was laying in the bed, and I did a very simple technique to alter my state of consciousness. It's very simple. It's called autogenic. It's called autogenic technique. And all I do is I start with from my feet, and it's just breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, very relaxed. And I'll focus on my right foot, and I'll say to myself out loud, my right foot is heavy and relaxed, and I'm at peace. And I say that 3 times, and then I focus, and I focus relaxing my left foot. My left foot is very heavy and relaxed, and I'm at peace. And I say that 3 times, and I say, my feet are very heavy, relaxed, and I'm at peace. And I go through each part of my body, starting with my feet. I go my right leg, left leg, my stomach, my chest, my lower back, my upper back, my shoulders, my arms, my hands. I work it up to my neck. I work it up to my jaw. I work it up to my eyes. And then even to my breathing, I say my breathing is relaxed and I'm at peace. And I went through this process, Bonan. I spent that time that I was in there for 2 hours. And when you do this process, you start to alter your state of consciousness. It distorts time. It distorts time, so it didn't seem like 2 hours. It seemed actually much shorter. But let me tell you, I repeated this process over and over, and I was in such a state of relaxation that when the nurse came in to ask me, the anesthesiologist came in to ask me to prep me for surgery, my eyes were like this. I could hardly keep my eyes open, and I had a big smile on my face. And she goes, and I told her what I was doing. I said, yeah, I've spent this time, putting myself in an altered state to make it easy. And she goes, man, you're making my job really, really easy. She asked me a few questions. The next thing I know, they put me on the gurney, and they're rolling me to the surgery room. I remember them transferring me to the surgery table. I could hardly keep my eyes open. This was before any anesthesia or anything. The next thing I know, they put the mask on, and boom, I was out. That was it.
As a result of doing some martial arts, the knee surgery had to be done?
Yes.
Yeah.
From years of doing that. Yeah, years of doing that. Yep.
Yeah, so what exactly do you do? Or did you do?
As far as to injure the knee, or what do I do as far as
martial arts?
Oh, I've done martial arts since about 1989, a long time, and studied Muay Thai boxing, judo, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, sambo, Jeet Kune Do, Filipino martial arts, Kali, Arnis, Eskrima, lots of different styles of martial arts.
Yeah, do you train in terms of lifting now?
As far as resistance training and that type of thing, I do a little bit of that. Since I've injured my knee, I haven't been doing a lot, but I've just started now getting back into training. But as far as resistance training, I like to use free weights, and I don't use heavy weights, but I do a lot of repetitions, and I love the kettlebell. I love using the kettlebell.
Cool. Yeah, quite universal and effective for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everybody's got to have a couple.
I think it goes really well with martial arts type training.
You can combine it for the whole full body exercises, and it hits you quite nicely.
Another thing I love is yoga. I love doing the stretching and the breathing and the relaxation. I think is wonderful. It's one of the few exercises that I do, and afterwards I feel like I had a deep tissue massage. Most of the other stuff I feel beat up, but this I'm like, man, this is great. I feel really good. But I thought I would just bring that story up to connect, like you're saying, like the power of the mind and how it can affect the body. There's absolutely, unequivocally, tons of evidence, documented evidence of just how much influence in the form of healings, in the form of recovery. It's tremendous. And so on the other end, it can do all those things, but on a negative side, it could also it can cause us to maybe believe we're a werewolf. It could cause us, all these other things.
Sensory deprivation tasks could probably be quite nicely combined with meditative practices similar to the ones you've just described. Have you ever been in one of those?
No, I haven't. Most of them,
you know what it is.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about.
So it's just like this receptacle, this huge, basically tank in which you go inside, and it's totally soundproof and dark. And at the bottom of it, there's a little bit of water to keep your body floating. Yeah, but you are deprived of sounds and deprived of and it's a great place to just meditate because your body is relieved of touching any part with anything else. Because I imagine when you were laying in the bed, you still felt sort of lying somewhere, right? So, but when you're supported by the water, you feel at one point, if you meditate well, you reach this state as if the only thing that exists is just your head, and your eyes are closed, so you don't even see your body, so you feel like you're just your brain. You are just consciousness. Yeah.
You know what that kind of reminds me of? The description, I wonder if that's how we felt when we were in our mother's womb.
Perhaps, probably we relate to it. That's what we strive to return to, I guess.
Yeah. Really interesting. Interesting.
How crazy is that some people claim to remember what the fuck happened when they were in the womb? Have you ever talked to those?
I've heard that. I've never met someone personally, but I really do believe in the power of the subconscious mind. And do I think that it's possible that people could have actual memories of that experience? I think it's very possible. I've worked with some people using hypnosis, and in some cases going back using regression to times where they were very young in certain incidences, and the descriptions that they will tell me, and the emotions that they will experience as if they were in that period of time. In fact, even voices changing from an adult to a little child. Yeah, it's amazing how.
Is hypnosis used recreationally?
Yeah, I mean, there are some people that just would use it in the form of just relaxation, just as a way for stress relief. It's been around since
I wonder how it is if you get hypnotized by a complete professional just for the purpose of, having fun, or somehow similarly to recreational hallucinogenic drug users or something like that. Yeah. How would that feel?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone to when I was younger and I was investigating, because I've always been interested in psychology, and when I was really researching it, I kept coming across stuff on subconscious, and when I started studying the subconscious mind, inevitably I would find hypnosis mentioned, and I became curious, and I went to a professional hypnotherapist, and it was interesting. They took me through a relaxation process, and it was very, very relaxing. When I was actually practicing and I was seeing clients, this was a long time ago, there was a group of bouncers. These guys were big. These guys were rough and tough, tattoos, everything, all these piercings in their face, but they were the nicest guys. I mean, they were very, very nice, very respectful, and they would come to me because their work was so stressful. I mean, your job, you're working in a club, and any night you could be in a physical confrontation.
Sure.
And so I would take some of these guys through a guided relaxation, and I'll never forget, there was this big guy, I mean, huge, tattoos, mean looking, and excuse me. Again, I'm running my chops a lot here, but I helped him relax, and he started to cry during the process.
Interesting.
And afterwards, when he came out of hypnosis, he was in a very happy, good state, and he said that he had never really been able to cry, and I had helped him get to that point where he was so relaxed and comfortable and safe that his body just responded and shed those tears that he was never able to shed before.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that probably has got something to do with also in taking those psychedelic drugs like mushrooms or LSD that often causes rather unforeseen and unpredictable body reaction quite often. It's interesting how some sort of, I guess, I've got to be a bit cautious of the usage of the word trauma, because I've been observing this word being thrown left and right these days.
It seems
often.
to be
I
quite
feel
often,
yeah, because everybody seems to be traumatized and everybody's this and that and trauma this, trauma that. But, I think there's nothing particular wrong with sucking it up a little bit sometimes and manning up a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I do think that it would probably be unfair to say that toxic masculinity is not real. Apparently, it does get real sometimes and does get a little bit out of hand. Yeah, but most of the times it's just a bit of an abused term, in my opinion. So, anyway, yeah. I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Well, shit, we've done a pretty serious dive, I think, and it's always been quite lovely with you, because you managed to bring interesting information and supported by books and recommendation and insights, for which I'm really grateful as always.
Well, here's another kudos to you, Bodan, because in my next book, I might have a section on werewolves and skinwalkers that I normally wouldn't have.
Nice.
So you keep throwing these topics out, and it's quite interesting because if I'm not familiar with them, it expands my mind, and like I said, I'm very curious. I like to study things. So if you have another topic,
I feel like I'm ready to bring it up to the table immediately right now. Although I feel like, considering the depth with which you approach these upcoming topics, I've got to be a bit careful, because I don't want to sort of disperse your attention to superficial topic. Although what's been lurking on my mind, apparently something that's been lurking on a lot of people's mind lately, last couple of years, is clearly aliens. The governments of many countries have been talking about releasing some secret materials, and this Bob Lazar story and sightings that are exploding these days. So I think we've got to jump next time, probably after another good 1 or 2 months into the alien topics.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
yeah. I do touch a little bit about that in the book that I wrote, The Red-Haired Giants of Lovelock Cave and Other Ancient Mysteries. I kind of touch a little bit, and then you have like the Nazca mummies, those mummies that came out of Peru, and some people saying, are they fake? Are they real? What's going on here? But yeah, a lot of interesting discussion.
You are familiar with Jeremy Corbell's materials and documentaries?
Heard of him? I'm not real familiar with his work.
But the Bob Lazar story is
Bob Lazar. Yeah. I saw a documentary about him, or that he did, and that was back in the 90s. But I think that guy is legit. You know, a lot of people say, oh, he's got a background that's kind of shady, and I don't believe him. But you know what? My personal opinion, I think there's definitely truth to his story.
But it's interesting because in stories like that, there can always be layers upon layers. So now
there can be layers upon layers, and maybe there is some truth, and maybe there is some false. And then
he could have been simply set up.
He could have been set up, and our government here in the United States, they have been known to do that, to implant this false information to give to researchers, for manipulative purposes.
But the recent news, a lot of accounts of some UFO arising from the ocean. What is it called? UAP?
USO?
I think it's not UFO.
Well, they call them UAPs now. The older terms like the USO, unidentified submerged object.
That's what's really fascinating, because it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. If you take seriously the claim that the ocean has been unstudied for like 90% or something.
What a better place to hide than would be the very oceans. We know more about probably what's some of these planets outside of our own planet than we do about the oceans that are right.
Which is insane. Yeah. That's totally insane. That can't be for coincidence, in my opinion. That ain't no accident that we don't mess with the oceans.
Yeah. Here's another area of research that I'm just starting to look into. Clowns.
Oh, clowns. Shit. Well, I know a couple.
Yeah, I know a lot. But there's a gentleman. He wrote a book. He said that he titled it "The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns," and he actually does a lot of research and traces the origins of clowns and ties them in with the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible, the fallen angels. And at first I was like, come on, like, what is this? And I started listening to some of his podcasts and some of the research that he's doing, and I just purchased this gentleman's book. And I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but I'm going to be reading that because I'm interested in, obviously, in the Nephilim and the giants, and I'm very fascinated. So if you ever want to do a show on clowns, I know there's a lot of people that are freaked out.
I got to invite a couple of people.
You got to invite a couple. But I know a few clowns myself. There's different types of clowns, right?
Yeah, there are non-exciting clowns.
Right, yeah, there are different types. I think there's different categories of clowns. There are those clowns that like buying
some vape. That's a separate type.
Yeah.
People say this new Joker film is a complete flop.
Is it really?
Was pumped up about it. Yeah, people shit on it all over.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how I ended up talking from Werewolves to the Joker film, but this where conversation takes us. Endlessly grateful to you as always.
Well, thank you so much, Bonan. I really enjoy your podcast. You have some just great questions, and we just seem to have a good dynamic, and the conversation flows really well.
Yeah, well, because we both reach this sort of slightly geeky frequency, when we're seriously talking. I gotta salute to you for speaking on absolutely serious terms to this werewolf mask.
Right.
Because as you were given one of those stories, I'm looking at myself, and here is this retarded looking bitch, and you keep seriously talking about yourself. I'm like, no way, this guy doesn't even think how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. It's part of life, I think, is just having fun and being geeky and nerdy sometimes. I mean, gosh, we've got so many serious things in the world going on, and it's nice to kind of take a little break from that and have a little fun and talk about folklore and history and psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to lose that spark.
Not to lose it, and the psychology and everything, and mental illness, and being able to kind of integrate and tie these things in. And it's just been a fun and fascinating conversation, and I definitely appreciate you, Bodan.
Thank you very much.